And I guess we're live. So now I should probably open up a chat window so I can see. On the live events, I don't think that I can see how many people are actually watching. Oh yeah, I've got 7 right now. So maybe we'll just hold off a little bit before I start with the announcements. But then what I'm going to do is go over some upcoming meeting announcements, and then we'll turn it over to Matt. And hopefully I can figure out how to do that. So we're up to 9 now. If you guys that are watching it would make a comment or a question in the chat notes, just so I know that it works. I want to be monitoring this, and I want to make sure that I can answer questions while Matt's speaking. Okay, we're up to 13. This is an experiment also, you know, so hopefully, normally when we meet in person, everybody's eating by now. So you guys are going to have to do virtual pizza. Okay. Okay, I've gotten some, looks like. All right, I'm getting questions. Okay, so we're up to 15 right now. Maybe we're 2 minutes in. Maybe I should wait a little bit. Let me make an announcement here, although wait for about 3 more minutes, I think, and then I'll just do some brief announcements, and then we'll go ahead. Okay, I was hoping that we would get some. We might be stuck at about 15. Now here goes 16. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and start. We might be on the low end this time, but hopefully we'll get this recorded, and I'll be able to post a link to the recordings after it's over with. So anyway, I want to thank you for attending the August meeting. I know this has been kind of weird, a weird year for all our user group meetings and conference. And so I appreciate everybody attending today. And I just want to go over upcoming meetings. We have already scheduled our meetings up through the end of the year. And so in September, we're going to have Erica talk about Project Cortex. If you haven't heard about Project Cortex, it might be a really good session to understand how Project Cortex can help your organization. And so that'll be September. And then October, we have Susan Hanley. She's going to be talking about how to get started with hub sites. Obviously, this is a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 topic. So if you're already out online, then this will be talking about how to use hub sites. And then November, we're talking about online customizations for Office 365 SharePoint Online. And then December, we're talking about embedding the user experience in your out-of-box solutions. So that's what we have right now scheduled. If you have topics that you want to see, and you can either suggest them during this meeting, and we'll try to find a speaker that can speak on that topic, or we have a form also on our website that you can fill out and suggest a topic. Speaking of our website, you can see how attractive our website is. It's non-existent because I'm not a designer. And so this is our public website. It's so plain, it's embarrassing. And so if anybody has any experience with WordPress and making things look really nice, I'd really appreciate it. But this is our website, so our URL, omaha365.org. And then if you click on events, you can see the upcoming events, and there will be links to all the live event so that you can attend those meetings. We haven't gone with registrations for each meeting yet, and not sure. I guess we'll figure out after this event whether or not we want to go with registrations. And then also, we have the ability for everybody to log into a Teams tenant, and then that way we could all participate in a live discussion. So maybe that's something else that we might do. I guess I'll have to send out a poll and see what people think. So that's it. Today's speaker is Matt Weston. We're going to be talking about building your SharePoint intranet for the 2020s. Matt is from the UK, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so we were just talking. He just put his kids to say goodnight to his kids, and he's ready to spend some time with us. So I'm going to, if I can figure out the technology, I'm going to send video, and there's Matt. And
awesome.
There you go, Matt.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Perfect, okay. The first thing that I'll say is I'll try and I'd like this to try and be as interactive a session as possible. So if you do have questions, please do post them into chat, post them into the Q&A. And Dave, please do interrupt me if you see questions come through, and we can answer the questions there and then. So that'd be quite nice. So first of all, thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you for me this evening, for you guys this lunchtime. Thank you, Dave, for inviting me to come and join you. It's a real pleasure to really take advantage of being able to do this remotely and be able to present thousands of miles away over here in the UK. So a little bit about me to start off with. So as Dave's already said, my name is Matt Weston. I'm from Birmingham in the UK. Which is probably about 120 miles north of London. The easiest place that I can describe it is I'm just a little bit down the road from Stratford, where Shakespeare was born. So that's one of the big things that we have going for us. Work-wise, I run a small consultancy based around Microsoft 365, but more so around the collaboration space. So what I talk about throughout this session is really what I talk to a lot of clients about as well. Community-wise, I spend a lot of time, or as much time as I can, juggling family as well, but trying to do things within the community. So I run user groups over here. I run a SharePoint and Office 365 user group. I also run a Power Apps and Power Automate user group. Now, whilst I'm an MVP for Power Apps and Power Automate, my first love and my true love always will be SharePoint. So that's the reason why I always try and talk about things that are SharePoint related, even when I'm talking about Power Apps and Power Automate. If you do have any questions after this session, please do feel free to reach out either through David or please feel free to reach out to myself as well. I am active on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can also find my blog and my YouTube channel out there as well. So please do feel free to reach out, and anything I can do to help you going forward, I will gladly do. So what are we going to be talking about within this session? We're going to be talking about building a SharePoint intranet. And it's really cool to see that you've got Susan Handley in a few months' time talking about the way that you can use hub sites within your intranets. Because I'm going to talk a little bit about hub sites today, but I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that. But what I am going to talk about is really the key features for SharePoint being used as an internet platform. And I'm going to be looking at some, obviously quite a lot of the advantages for it, but I'll also talk about some of the disadvantages for it as well. I'll also be talking about getting started. So how do we actually get started with creating a rich and engaging intranet using SharePoint? We'll look at the various technologies, including communication sites, home sites, hub sites, and then how we can add some of the other features of SharePoint in to really make our intranet as rich as possible and as easy to manage as possible by our end users. The way I always like to start this session is with a little bit of a walk down memory lane. Now, there's going to be people on the call that you're going to go, actually, I remember all of these different versions of SharePoint. So I personally started with SharePoint 2007, but I actually I've worked with all versions back to SharePoint 2003. So even at this point, SharePoint was very, very loosely used as an intranet, as a portal solution. David, do you remember? Do you remember 2003?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I started actually working with it when it was 2007, but I was upgrading sites and applications from 2003.
Cool. Yeah. So a lot of the technology that we still see in SharePoint now came from SharePoint 2003. So things like the basic concepts of lists and libraries and so the way some of the web parts actually work. If we look at the events web part, the calendar, that hasn't changed since 2003. My God, does that need modernizing? But the technology underpinning everything has really stood the test of time. But where we really started to see the big advancement in terms of SharePoint being used as an intranet, and more so from a collaboration style of intranet, was with SharePoint 2007, when we brought in Moss, because really this is where I first started to find that people were trying to customize it, trying to brand it, trying to make it something that could then fit all the use cases that would be needed within the organization. Certainly from my point of view, this is also where I really started to build additional web parts to bring in those additional pieces of functionality that really made it rich and functional as an intranet. But we obviously had a number of issues around these versions so far, even going into 2010, where if we needed to do anything, really we needed to be a developer. We needed to be able to write HTML. We needed to understand CSS. If you wanted to, from 2007 and a little bit in 2010, we would end up writing C# or .NET web parts to actually go and deploy into SharePoint. So the whole intranet piece didn't really sit where we expect it to. It didn't really sit with communications or HR or any of the organizations that we see drive these types of projects. It always sat very much as an IT-led system. But as we saw the evolution of SharePoint moving, we saw the differences in the types of technology that was coming through. So with 2010, it brought with it the ability for us to start using client-side programming, to be able to start interacting with some of our SharePoint sites using the client-side object model, using JavaScript as opposed to just deploying everything onto the actual server or using C#. So we then started to see the evolution of not just the people who are using SharePoint, but the people who are developing it, moving away from being SharePoint specialists now to being a broader type of developer, being able to apply normal web development techniques to actually use within SharePoint. So we're starting to build up into where we are now. Where did we go next? We went to SharePoint 2013. This brought with it a huge change to the actual user interface, where now Microsoft is starting to consider what is now aesthetically pleasing and what is now much more scalable for an intranet platform for organizations. So not just looking at this now as a way of storing data and a way of storing documents, but now how can we actually start to leverage more information? How can we leverage our communications more effectively? And one of the nice things that actually came with 2013, which end users loved because they could do this without having to write any code, they could use the promoted links list and the promoted links web part, because it gave them the ability to have that those rollovers, those graphical pieces of content on the screen. That meant that they could do it themselves. They didn't have to rely on somebody else to do that for them. So now, just with this one web part, again, we're starting to see a shift of who's actually responsible for the development and the creation of the content and the sites within a SharePoint-based intranet, moving away from developers, moving more towards the end users. And this is a trend that carried on all the way through SharePoint 2013, 16, and obviously now 19, really to bring us up to date with where we are now, where we're now working with what is considered modern SharePoint. So modern SharePoint has seen a huge shift. So now you don't need to know HTML, you don't need to understand CSS, you don't even need to understand SharePoint in order to be able to create a content within a SharePoint intranet. The self-service provisioning means that I can go and create my own sites and then I can bring those into my intranet, and the responsibility is now solely based on the end users. Even to the point, as we'll see in a moment, where we actually look at the editing experience for the for SharePoint pages. It's now very click, what you see is what you get. I want some text, I'm going to type the text, and away it goes. And as we go through the next 40 minutes or so, I'll just call out some of the advancements that have been made by Microsoft as well to really make this whole process as simple as possible. But what I always like to throw out whenever I talk to anybody about an intranet is, what is a modern intranet? And still to this day, this really causes a lot of head scratching because everybody has their own definition about what an intranet is. So traditionally, an intranet was all about communication, but it was all very much one way. It was all about, can the organization get their communications, get their news and announcements and all the information they want out to the users? But because it was just communications, it was just one way, it didn't really have the level of engagement that we were looking for. So quite often, if I speak to customers and clients who have this type of communication only intranet, then when I ask the question, how many of your users actually use your intranet? Most of the time, the answer is quite low in terms of the overall user base. Yes, they might force people to go to it because it's their homepage when they open the browser, but there's no reason for the users to keep going back, because once you've read those communications, there's no need to keep going back and revisiting. So is a modern intranet more, rather than just communication, is it now engagement? So we're not just looking for that one-way communication. We're not just looking to get the information out to the users. We're also now looking to get information back from them. We're looking to give them ways that they can actually interact with what we're doing. So then we can gather sentiment, we can gather feedback. The users actually start to feel like they're more involved in that whole company intranet. Is a modern intranet personalization? I know for a fact that when I go onto my intranet, I expect to see things that are relevant to me. Yes, I'm looking for those parts that are corporate, that I need to see because it's giving me that awareness, it's giving me that the bigger picture. But really, what is going to keep me personally coming back to an intranet is I need to go there because it's helping me to find the information that I want. It's very personal and it's very focused on me. And I was actually on a call earlier on with one of our partners. And we're speaking to a customer tomorrow about an intranet, and they are very interested in personalization and those things that are constantly changing based on what the user's doing. Why? Because it's actually taking away the focus from them having to keep their own content, their own corporate content as up to date, because the actual person's interaction within Office 365 is keeping that content up to date for them. So again, it's taking away the emphasis from always being something that's corporate driven to something that's now being personal. And is a modern intranet collaboration. So is it a way that is it the place that we now come to expect to work together? And how does that then fit in with Microsoft Teams and Yammer and the way that we would collaborate socially? So is a modern intranet one of these things, or is it all of them? And this is, if we were having a SharePoint later, this is one of those things where we would end up spending hours debating this. For me, I like to think that an intranet is all of these things. It has that communication. It's got the engagement so that when I am communicated to, I can feed back. It's got that personalization, so that communication that I see is actually relevant to me, not just the generic things that the company's pushing out. But then it's also the place that I can go and I can collaborate with my colleagues. I can go and I can then use all of those good things that SharePoint brings to the best effect. And I'm doing this all in one place. So that's what I personally expect from an intranet. But the question I always get asked is, why should I use SharePoint? Because we've got so many different platforms out there that I could be using for an intranet instead. And there's a number of things that I tend to throw into the mix as to why I like using SharePoint as an intranet platform. The first, again, we'll see this in a moment, is that I don't need to worry about anything being mobile responsive. So Microsoft obviously came up with a massive realization probably about 4 years ago that everybody's connected by a smart device. So everything now within Microsoft's development strategy is mobile first. It has to work on the mobile device, and then we can scale up from a mobile to use it on a desktop. So now that's empowering me as a user to be able to really take advantage of cloud technology. Because for me, cloud is being able to access my service and my content anytime, anywhere, on any platform. And being mobile responsive, that's exactly what I'm getting from SharePoint. Everything that I do is protected and governed by the Microsoft 365 governance bubble. So again, because I've got those data loss protection policies, I've got those sensitivity labels defined, and I've got them applied potentially across my content, then I don't need to worry as much about my content being seen by the people who shouldn't be seeing it. So, for example, if we're using the more advanced features of Azure Information Protection, I can actually hide things from being shown in Microsoft Teams if it's protected. So there is a lot of extra security that comes from doing this. From a user point of view, I log into Windows every single day. My Windows, it authenticates against Azure AD, which means as soon as I hit my intranet homepage within SharePoint, I'm already authenticated using single sign-on. That goes then for everything else that I use within my Microsoft 365 platform. So I can move in and out of different services. I'm not going to have to remember about different usernames and password combinations. I can have everything in one single place across what is quite now a consistent user interface. And all of that really leads into the next point, which is the ease of use for users. Not only for being able to go and access the content, but also for being able to author the content. And I'm really going to try and focus on some of the key things as we go through as well. So it's now easier than ever for users to go and create pages, go and create rich content because of the tools that Microsoft actually provide us using SharePoint. And the thing that I love, I log on every single week and I play spot the difference between what's changed in the last week with SharePoint and the rest of Office 365. But we are working on an evergreen platform, which is a platform that's constantly evolving. It's constantly improving. As technology moves, so does our intranet, and so does the capabilities of what we can actually achieve. So those things together, plus the whole integration piece with other services, being able to bring all of those elements such as Power Apps, being able to use Stream and Forms, being able to use Yammer, trying to bring all of those into one single platform that's not trying to do everything, that's allowing other tools to come in and help it. Bringing all of this into a single unified interface is a fantastic use case for me for using SharePoint. But why not? So the thing that we need, that obviously we're getting a lot because of using SharePoint, but there are some things that you need to give ground for. The first is that it's very limited in terms of the branding and the customizations. So branding is very much limited to, yes, I can apply a theme, I can apply a logo, and that's really about it in terms of my branding customization out of the box. I can deploy additional features using code, so I can use SharePoint Framework extensions and I can plug additional things in. But if I'm just staying with vanilla SharePoint, then really my hands are quite tied. Some people love that. Some people aren't so keen. So it all depends on how much you actually want to try and bring your level of branding into your intranet. Just remember that there are things that you can do within the canvas that we'll see later on as to really take it to the next level anyway. But one of the big issues that I come across, one of the big objections for using SharePoint is SharePoint has a reputation. It has a reputation over years of poor implementations, about poor customizations, and therefore that reputation with SharePoint has followed it, even to SharePoint Online now. Not as much, however, I still have conversations with customers where I speak to them and they're umming and ahhing about whether to use SharePoint because they've had bad experiences with it in the past. But what we'll hopefully see as we go through this session is that there are some really nice things in SharePoint now that almost start to dispel some of the myths that SharePoint has had to contend with in the past. And the final one, you never know what Microsoft are going to do. So this is the evergreen double-edged sword. Evergreen, good, exciting, it's constantly moving, but you never quite know what Microsoft are going to be doing next. The roadmap is quite well published, but there are always some things that do get rolled out without announcements, some things that roll out and sometimes break. But that is the world that we're living in within cloud computing. Yeah, cloud computing, effectively a flash term for using someone else's PC or someone else's server. So Microsoft control this. So we're at the behest of Microsoft as to what's going to happen with regards to our platform. So they're the whys and for me the why nots. But how do we actually get started with building our SharePoint intranet? Now this is always the hardest part, getting started. How do I find what I can do? What's the best way of being able to articulate what the capabilities of the platform are? Now, this is, again, where Microsoft have really brought to the forefront a really nice piece of technology called the SharePoint Lookbook. So this is a styled brochure where you can go and you can see some examples of templates and you can start to browse it. You can show your customers. You can actually go and have a look and see what you might want to use in your within your own intranet. So let's go and have a quick look at the SharePoint Lookbook, because it actually does a lot more than what most people give it credit for. So the SharePoint Lookbook is available from lookbook.microsoft.com. And this really, on the face of it, is just a standard SharePoint site, or a standard website. If I want to, I can download the Lookbook PDF and then I can print it and I can then have that as a brochure for when I go out and speak to customers. But what I actually prefer to do is look at the designs that Microsoft have actually put together to really help me get inspired for what I want to do with my intranet. So we have a number of designs already created for us. For example, I have organizational ones. So let's go and have a look at an organizational-led intranet page, where it shows me what the page looks like. But as well as showing me what the page actually looks like, it will show me what the site features are. So for example, any of the site features I can click on, and it will actually take me into the relevant Microsoft Docs pages to go and find out more information about how those particular features work. Even if I'm interested in how some of these web parts are put together, I can expand out the web parts. So for example, I can look at the hero here. I can see which is this web part at the top. I can see its configuration. So it's configured with a full width with 5 tiles. And again, if I want help on that web part, then we've got some really good documentation straight off that link that allows me to go and find out more about how to use it, how to configure it, and what its capabilities are. But as well as being able to have the communication type intranet pages, I've also got departments that are set up. So I can come into here and I can look at some of the examples of departments and how they have been configured. But we can also look at collaboration. So we also have the ability to come in here and see how our team sites can also have some really nice web parts, some really nice styling applied to it in order to make it functional and fit within our intranet. So let's go and have a look at one of my favorite ones, which is called the perspective. Because I can look at this and I could go, actually, yeah, I really like the look of that. I want to deploy that into my tenancy so that I can go and have a look at it and start to play with it and start to click it and really get a good feel for it. Now I've got two options. I could either go through and I can follow what the web parts are and I can configure that all completely by hand. Or what I've got the ability to do now is I can come into my lookbook, I can go and add to my tenant. So that is basically going to look at what look at the template that I want to deploy. If it's the first time, it will ask for consent to reach across into my tenancy. But this will then use a SharePoint PnP, Patterns and Practices provisioning engine, to basically take that site and deploy it somewhere on my SharePoint tenancy. So all I need to do is give it an email to say who do we need to notify once this has been deployed, what's my site title, and where's it going to go. So what is the managed path and what is the URL? So so that's saying that it can't have the template because the site is already provisioned. Let's go and add the perspective too. And so what I can do then is I can click provision, and that will then fire across, and that will actually start to then create all of the key components that are on that template, including the templates, including the branding, and deploy that straight into my SharePoint tenancy. And that oh, was that a question?
Yep, we have a question. Can
Sure.
you take just pieces of the template instead of the whole template when you deploy it into your tenant?
Unfortunately, no. It's an all or nothing provisioning process. So the only way that you would be able to take individual pieces is to literally go and look at the actual web part configuration itself and recreate it. Cool. So excellent. So great question. Thank you. So that takes about 15 minutes to actually then go and provision. And that's when it's running quite slowly. I have seen it provisioning as quickly as 5 minutes. But what this will actually give me, here's one I created earlier. It will actually give me a fully fledged intranet site that I can then start to work with. So I can then take this and I can start to customize this. It's taking away a lot of the effort, a lot of the manual working to actually go and create a very, very engaging intranet page. But let's look at some of the things that I've got on here that really make this stand out. And the first is that we've got a very packed, a very busy intranet page with lots of information on there. And straight away, I can see that if I start to shrink this down, let's just make my screen a bit bigger, then my page is fully responsive. So I don't know if anybody actually tried to do this in any of the previous versions of SharePoint. I think I actually spent months trying to create a CSS that gave us some resemblance of responsiveness and didn't really manage to get all the way there. Whereas now that's completely responsive without me having to do anything else. So once I've got this, I can then come into here, I can come and edit it, and I can then start to use my my WYSIWYG editor, which has just gone very slow, and I can start to create a very rich and very engaging intranet page. So the fact that now I don't need any specialist web knowledge, I don't need any specialist SharePoint knowledge, I can hand this off to a standard user, and if they want to add some text or if they want to add a map or whatever it might be onto this page, then they can come onto the Plus and they can do it. The huge advantage that we've got as well with regards to not only the communication site that we're looking at the moment, but also with our team sites, is that we've also now got a very, very flexible way of creating layouts. In the past, I would have had to use HTML and CSS to create web part zones that couldn't actually be changed very easily without going back into code and changing them. Whereas now I've got a number of different layout options that I can have and mix and match directly within a page itself. So going from one column to two columns, no problems. I can have a one column at the top and then I can have two below. If I want to make a use of the full width of the page, then I can use a full width section. Or if I have web parts that are particularly long, I can actually have a vertical section as well. So I can really start to make my page exactly as I want it on a per page basis without having to worry about creating the exact page layouts, which are quite static and difficult to change. So that is one big advantage for being able to now bring this into SharePoint. But what has also been hugely improved is the way that we can actually come and create our content in the first place. Because even now, quite often, we still use an author Word content using Microsoft Word. So, for example, if I want to bring some text into here, let's just come and grab Word up here for a moment. And let's go and create some random text. So I'm just going to put rand. Let's have 3 paragraphs, 5 lines long. Okay, so I've got some dummy text. I'm going to put some formatting into this. So let's have a heading 1, let's have a heading 2, and a 3. Let's put some, oops. Let's put some bullets into here. So I can take everything that I want to do within Word. I can grab that. And what I can do now is bring that and just paste that straight into my SharePoint site. What we would have seen in the past is that I would have ended up with a lot of the bloat and the hidden HTML that actually exists within rich text editing within Microsoft Word. That would have come into my SharePoint site, and it, my God, would it have polluted it. It would have been an absolute nightmare then to actually bring it back, to try and get it back into control. But the way that the actual pasting process now works from Word into SharePoint Online is that it will strip all of that bloat from behind the scenes. It will maintain the basic formatting options that you have got within Word. So, for example, your H1s, your H2s, your bullets, and so on. And it will still represent them, but it will take the styling that is applied to your site rather than the styling that was applied into Word. So that, again, is a huge step forward because we don't necessarily need to author everything within the SharePoint interface. We can concentrate on the content creators, maybe doing that in Word, and then just very simply copying and pasting that into SharePoint for everybody else to then start to look at. And obviously, once I'm in here, I can start to then look at how I can move these web parts around just by dragging and dropping from different sections, from one side to another. And my web parts will automatically update based on the area that they're moving into. So very, very simple now from a page editing point of view. One of the things that was always missing as well, and I was so happy when Microsoft released this, was I can actually now undo. So I can now go and undo any changes that I have made to my page, and I can also obviously redo. And it's now also responsive to the keyboard shortcuts as well. So we're now bringing that experience of how we would author content from Microsoft Word, and we're bringing this into a web, very much into a web scenario. So I'm going to save that and let's publish that. Cool. So what we've got the concept of here as well is a number of personalization features that exist within SharePoint to really make this bespoke for me. So remember, I was talking earlier on about what is relevant to me is what keeps bringing me back to a SharePoint, to an intranet page. So there's a number of personalized features that I can really utilize out of the box when I'm creating my intranet page. So for example, I have the ability to use the Microsoft Graph and bring together what is considered my news. So if I just go and edit my page again, let's have a look at that. It's just past 6 o'clock, so it's key Netflix time over here in the UK. So apologies that my connection is slowing down slightly. But if I click on the edit for my news, then what I can see on here is that I've got news sources. I can either specify this site, I can select sites where I'm going to pull information from, or I can actually select what's recommended for the current user. So now it's not going to just take the information, the news items that's coming from this site or any site, to be honest. It's going to look at what I interact with, what are the sites that I most frequently use, and therefore it's going to surface the news items that are most relevant to me. And I've got exactly the same because of the graph, that force that sits behind everything that we use within Microsoft 365. I can also bring to the forefront my recent documents and my recent sites. So these are things that they're not new. They exist on the Office 365 portal homepage. They exist on the SharePoint landing page. But why do I want people to go there to find this information when I can bring them to my SharePoint site so that they can then be much more engaging in terms of looking at everything that I want them to look at in order to get to the information that they need to see about them. So that personalization really does help keep the engagement and keep people coming back to a SharePoint-based intranet. So we've so far looked at communication sites, and we've looked at the lookbooks. I mean, the communication sites really are intended for use in an intranet. The way that I define the difference between a communication and a team site is team sites obviously has a Microsoft 365 group most of the time, so it comes with a number of additional collaboration features. So team sites I very much save just for my collaboration aspects. My communication sites, on the other hand, these are the ones that I use for getting that information out, for having that engagement, for really helping people to find the information that they want. These are my signpost sites. Now, when we create our intranet and when we create our sites within SharePoint, we now have a very flat and very wide structure. So in the past, we would have created a number of sites, or we would have created our hierarchy using a sub-site structure. So all of our intranet sites would live in a single site collection, and we'd have a sub-site with a sub-site with a sub-site, which became very unwieldy to actually manage. Number one, it meant that if any of those sites needed to move, then we've got, first of all, quite a migration or administration effort to actually move it from one place to another. If anybody was bookmarking or linking to any content on those sites, then we would then have issues with broken and dead links, which again caused us a lot of issues and led to a lot of the problems that we had with SharePoint's reputation, because this was quite often done. So the best practice now is really to have each individual site as its own site, which means that they all live at the same level. But every intranet has an entry point, and that entry point is usually the SharePoint, the intranet landing page, which is generally a communication site. Now, whilst all of these sites live at the same level, what we have the ability to do is actually create one of these sites and almost elevate it above the others. Not physically, because they all still live at the same level, but in a logical way, we can actually make it what's called a SharePoint home site. So a SharePoint home site is designed to, number one, give you more interactivity when you're using the SharePoint mobile app. So you end up with an icon that appears as a home icon, and that will then allow you to quickly and easily get to your home site. But what Microsoft are also experimenting with, and they had actually done it and then they retracted the functionality again, was to actually then allow some of the rollover of the branding, the global navigation, and the footer to go from your home site, your communication site, across to the SharePoint landing page. And I'm hoping that they'll bring that back again, because that was a real big win for me. But in order for you to create a home site, this is where you need to go back into a little bit of PowerShell. It's not something that we can do at the moment through the SharePoint user interface. So I would have to fire up PowerShell ISE or Visual Studio Code, whatever our chosen PowerShell editor is, and go and write some basic shell. And it's only 2 lines. All I need to do is tell it what this SPO service is that I'm going to connect to. So what tenancy do I want to connect to? And then effectively, what is my home site? So set home site and give it the home site URL. And what that will do is that will then basically elevate that logically above all of the others. But sometimes we may actually want to change where that home site sits, particularly if we've actually had a SharePoint, an Office 365 tenancy for a long time, and our normal landing site. So what we actually see when I navigate to this type of site, which is my root site, for a lot of people that might still be classic. Now, whilst you can use modern pages on a classic site, there are a number of people now that are starting to opt to move or swap their classic root site with a modern communication site. And that is now quite possible. And again, this is one of those things where a little bit of PowerShell comes in really handy. Because what I can do is I can run the commandlet invoke SPO site swap, which is effectively going to tell it that I want to switch 2 sites around. What I can do is I can give it the source site. So I can tell it what site it is I actually want to move. I can tell it what the target is. Where do I want to move it to? So let's go and put that on the root site. But what I also need to do is tell it what am I going to do with the old site, so the site that I'm replacing. So what I would need to do is give it an archive. So effectively, that's what I could end up with. So let's just get rid of that on the right hand side. So quite often what I've certainly done with my tenancies in the past, I have done the site swap. I have made replaced my classic communication site with a modern, a classic team site or classic site with a modern communication site. And then I've used my SPO home site to then make that the top of my intranet. So I'm not going to run that because that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to actually run. But what that will do is effectively replace that with what I've got here as the perspective. So that would then become my root site. So that's something that quite often people like to do. But one of the things that we're still missing all the way through this is the ability really to have that consistent interface or that consistent global navigation across a number of my different sites. Microsoft have tried to implement it in different ways in the past. They tried to do it with taxonomy. They promised, oh, you can have this global navigation that's all based on the term store, but then limited the term, that particular term set to only being used by one site. So it didn't really achieve what we wanted it to achieve. So what did we do? We had to write code. We had to write custom master pages. We had to do all the things that Microsoft tell us is a bad idea. But what Microsoft have really released for us to be able to do this, but also to be able to group sites together, is to be able to use hub sites. So hub sites are a way of being able to, again, identify a parent and then associate children's sites to that parent. Or you can almost think of as a hub and spoke. So the hub is the primary site, which is going to govern the navigation. It's going to govern any styling and any branding. And then any of the spokes that get pushed into that hub are then going to also take advantage of that. So how do I do that? So the hub sites are all now completely managed through the SharePoint Administration Center. So when I come into my active sites, I can see here that in my admin center, I can see that I've got a hub column in my list, and I haven't got any at the moment. But again, I used to have to do this through PowerShell. I've now got a user interface that I can really nicely do this really simply, as long as I'm a SharePoint admin, of course. So I can come into my active sites. I can select the site that I want to be my hub. I can select hub, and I can register this as a hub site. It's going to ask for a name. And the nice thing is that if I want to maintain some control over what's actually coming into my hub or into my intranet, then I can actually specify who can associate sites, because this could be done by other users who are creating sites themselves. And I can put approval processes in place as well. I'll leave that blank for now. But I'm going to go and press save. So that is going to give me a hub. So you can see here that I've now got the perspective as a hub site. So now if I come back to my actual SharePoint site, and I'll just give that a refresh. So I've now got this additional navigation bar that sits across the top. And from here, I can add additional links. There we go. Okay, and let's just put a label in there, and I'm going to call this search engines, and I'm going to create some basic links. Let's stay on brand with Microsoft, and let's put Bing first. Let's go and put Google in there. And then I can obviously then structure my navigation. I can drag and drop around, and I can also save. So that then gives me my my navigation. But again, one of the enhancements that Microsoft have made around the hub site navigation is that if I have the mega menu turned on, which is this graphical, this slightly bigger, slightly more graphical, you can see it slightly better here. If I have this type of navigation switched on, then my hub site navigation will also respond to that. So let's say that I'm going to have multiple layers in here. So let's go and add another layer into here, and I'm going to have labels. I'm going to call this my UK search engines. Let's just drag that up, and let's have my US search engines. And let's just promote that, or make it a sublink even. Cool, so now I can actually have a mega menu sat across the top that if I was to go and add another site into this, which I'll do in a moment, then we'll also see that coming through as well. So let's quickly do that. Let's just go and fire up very quickly. I'm just conscious of the time. Let's go and create a new site. Going to create another communication site. Exactly the same applies to team sites as well. This same functionality exists. So if I just go and finish that, that will take a few seconds just to create. Okay, so now I've got another site within my intranet that should actually be part and parcel of the overall look and feel. So as the site owner, I can come into here. I can come to my site info. And what I've got the ability to do here is look at my hub site association, and I can select a hub. Now, the hub site associations, or the hubs that I see here, are obviously based on the ones that I have permissions to actually go and associate with. So if I wasn't in the list, I wouldn't be able to go and associate something there. Let's go and save that. So now, as a result of associating with that, what this site has automatically done is adopt the global navigation. It's adopted the theming from the top. So I've now got consistent theming and consistent branding across my site based on what my parent was. And if I scroll down, then even my footer is there as well. So everything that I've got here is very much governed by what is on the top site. So how does this then fit into my intranet? So I know Susan Hanley has some really good views on this as well. Do we now confuse users by having two navigations here, or do we move everything that was here and bring that up into the hub navigation? Obviously, that's a question that you're going to be looking at when you go through your design processes. I quite like doing that because then I've got a single navigation across all of my sites in my intranet. I can manage it from one place, which means the admin aspect is really simple. And I've got the graphical representation and also the graphical look that I get from using the mega menu. But what other advantages have I actually got? Again, very new. I don't know how many people have actually used these types of features yet, but we've also now got the ability to really take advantage of modern audiencing. Now, audiencing has been around in SharePoint for a long time. We could audience web parts and audience content in previous versions of SharePoint, but it was always quite clunky to actually manage it. It's much more simple again now because it's all very secure, either Microsoft 365 group based or security group based. But I can not only apply audiences to my content, I can also apply audiences to individual or groups of items within my navigation. So for example, I could have if I click on here, let's go and edit it. When I actually go and edit my label here, or even a hyperlink, what I've got the ability to do now is apply audience targeting. And just notice here that it does say up to 10 groups. So here I can either select security groups, or I can select a Microsoft 365 group. So if I start typing all in there, then I have two security groups called all company members or all users. Or if I go and type in one of my Microsoft 365 groups, then I can select the membership of that group to target that to. Why does this come in quite useful? It might be that I start to build out my navigation and I maybe have, let's just cancel that for a moment. I maybe have a HR specific area on my menu that I don't want everybody to be able to see and use because it's not relevant to them, but it is relevant to HR users. So I can start to target my menu. I can then also target all the content, such as my news and my documents and my pages, to specific groups of people based on whether they are based on their membership of various groups, or whether they're in there or not. So very simple to manage, very simple to implement now compared to what we've seen in the past. And that is certainly the navigation aspect is fairly new. Right, I'm going to run over very slightly. One of the other things that I tend to talk to people about when we talk about intranets, because it comes up every single conversation that I have, is how can we have some really nice pictures and some nice controlled content that our users can use to go and put onto our sites. Now, again, there's an element here that Microsoft have really helped us to do this, but there are also steps that you can take yourselves with your organizations to really help users to use the content that you want them to use. So, for example, if I command, actually, no, let's not create something on here. Let's go and create a new page. If my site decides to wake up. Right, so while that's waiting, what we're going to look at is the way that we can actually go and find content or find pictures to go and put onto our pages. Now, Microsoft have earlier in the year released what they call stock images. So you might have noticed this in Word and in PowerPoint, where you can now go to insert an image, and you can then go and select from a number of high resolution, high quality, royalty-free graphics to be able to go and use within your documents and your presentations. We have exactly the same available to us within our page authoring experience within SharePoint. Wow, come on, wake up. There we go, it's catching up. So when I go and either apply a banner or I put some content on the page, whichever one wakes up first. Then I will have the additional option to go and select stock images. So when I come up here, then it will give me my options on the left-hand side. I've got the ones that I normally use, which is my recents, my web search, and so on. And then I've got some really good graphics on here, just to help to make my pages as engaging as possible without having to go and steal some sort of grainy image off the internet to be able to use in my pages and my content. Cool. So there we can see them dropping in. So we get the idea. But what you can also do is you can also provide what are called organizational assets. And this has been around for actually quite a while. And the reason I always put it into this presentation is because most people don't consider it when they're looking at how they set up their intranet. So organizational assets allow me to specify a document library or libraries within my SharePoint sites that I can then use as a central repository for going and storing content. So for example, in my organization, I've got my Contoso media here. So I can click on there, and this could be a document library that is managed by my communications team that has organization sanctioned images or branded images that can be used to help to enhance our pages or enhance our content. So what I've got here is I've got a number of images in here. Because it's a document library, this is defaulted to the list view, but if I go to my tiles, then I'll be able to go and see these as tiles instead. Now, again, this is one of those things that's not quite, it's lacking a little bit in the way it's implemented in terms of we can't do this through the SharePoint user interface. Again, this is something that I need to actually dive into PowerShell to actually come and do. Again, really one line of PowerShell. I call the commandlet add SPO org assets library. I give it the library URL that I want it to use. So in this case, I've just got a library called Contoso Media. And what I can also do as well is rather than just having Contoso Media, I can give it a thumbnail URL. So I can give it a picture for the users to look at when they actually use it. Now, what this actually does when you run this commandlet is it makes that it promotes that document library to become an organizational assets library, but it also creates what's called a content development delivery network, a CDN, which uses the best types of caching and delivery mechanisms to be able to deliver this content to your web page in the most efficient way. So it employs caching, employs renditioning, and so on. So it really means that you're going to get a good experience from using those images in your content. So the final thing that I really want to just show you, again, because this is brand new, I've only recently started playing with this over the last couple of weeks, is that quite often we have a requirement now because our intranets now are all about accessibility. That accessibility could be from whether the images have got alt text, which SharePoint will now apply using artificial intelligence. So we're bringing in that visual impairment piece. Whether with these also being you can use your immersive reader to read the pages and it will understand what's going on the page. But accessibility doesn't just mean impairment. It also means crossing the language boundary. So being able to provide different versions of your content based on the language that is native to the person who's reading it. This is particularly important if you are, for example, some of the you might have a Spanish and US English requirement where you need to provide the content in both languages. Here in the UK, quite often we need to provide English and Welsh. So we need to be able to cater for both of those language sets. Now I can do this within my SharePoint sites. However, it's not quite as rich as what I would like it to be. So I can come into my site information. I can come to my view all site settings. So I can come behind the scenes. And what I can do is I can actually enable language settings for my site. So that means my news items and my pages, I can have multiple renditions of that same page in different languages. So let me just do a little bit. So under site administration, I have language settings. So if I click on that, then this will eventually load up. There we go. So it enables me to enable pages and news to be translated into multiple languages. Now, I don't like the language that Microsoft actually use here, because this suggests that this is actually going to do some of the work for me. Be under no illusion, it's not. All it's going to do is allow me to store different versions of it. But it's worthwhile understanding about how this works. So I can come into here and I can type a new language. So I can type Spanish into here. And as you can see, it has all of the key language packs supported here. Yeah, so you can really take advantage of what you have available to really cater to all of your different users. I'm just going to hit save on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the perspective. Because what we'll see is when we actually come back and edit the home page, is that I now have an additional option, an additional edit option on the top bar. And what that will do is that will actually present the languages and whether they have been published or not. So we can, as well as being able to cater for normal publishing and normal draft versions, but we'll also have exactly the same for our languages. So you can see here, I now have translation. Let's click on translation. What that's going to do is open a blade on the right hand side for me. And it will tell me whether this page is available in those additional languages or whether they're still in draft. So at the moment, it won't have actually done anything at all with those other languages until I actually come in here and press view. There we go. So here's all the languages. I can say I'm going to create my Spanish one, or I can click, if I've got multiple languages, I can create for all languages. But let's go and create. So that has just said it's created a Spanish version of my page. Let's go and view it. So this is where Microsoft cheat a little bit. It will translate parts of SharePoint into Spanish, so to apply the language pack, and so other parts that may not necessarily have been available before are now in Spanish. However, all of my content remains in English. So what I would need to do here is you identify somebody to come and start to edit this page and actually do this translation for me. So it's not using machine translation. It's literally, I need to get someone in here to come and convert all of my English into Spanish. So I can't, I apologize, I can't speak Spanish. I can barely speak English, but this is my Spanish. Once I've done that, I can then publish it. Okay, so now I've got two different versions of the page. So let's come back to the home again. So this is my primary language. It recognizes that this is I need to show English first. But what we should see, it's disappeared. Let's just do Control F5 on that. I should actually see the ability up here to change the language from English through to Spanish. But what I'll point out to you in a moment is how this actually works so that you know how to go and change it. If you need to go and delete something, you know how to go and delete it, and you know how you can further control it. Come on. There we go. So up here, I now have a language selector. So if I click on English, it will show me what my available languages are. So this is based on the language versions that have been published. So if I click Spanish, it will switch and it will show me the version which has just got my Spanish translation in there. Just while we're waiting for that to load, what I'll point out is just look at the URL bar up here. So normally my pages would just live in site pages and then I would have home.aspx. What I've actually got here is I've got /es, ES for España, for Spanish. So what it's doing when it creates the renditions of these is actually creating a replica of the page and putting it into a folder within the site pages library that is going to contain the pages for that language set. It's not doing it as a different site. It's not doing any on-the-fly translation. It's literally a page-for-page translation being stored in a different folder, which means that you can then obviously then secure those folders down just to the Spanish translations, the Italian translations, the French translations, whatever you might want to do. You can start to apply some further permissioning to that. But I still think that's quite cool. It's not quite as advanced as what I would have liked, but you know, I think that's quite a good accessibility piece that Microsoft have now brought through. So we've gone through quite a few things in terms of what SharePoint can do and what the modern capabilities are, and why, for me, all these features really feature heavily in a SharePoint intranet for the modern world. But like everybody else, I always want more. And one of the things that I always tend to go and install is from the PnP Dev team, the Patterns and Practices team. If you're not familiar with PnP Dev, go and check them out. They are community developers who are actually very, very embedded with the Microsoft developers themselves. So the team is led by Visa Javonen, who's the lead developer within Microsoft. But there's also a number of other MVPs and community contributors that all help to build web parts and additional functionality. And a lot of the time, what we see is that functionality does get absorbed into the SharePoint product completely. Now, the one that I do highly recommend is Search. So go and check out the Microsoft Search web parts. You can install it as a SharePoint framework web part, and it gives you the ability to, on your page, have your a custom search box, custom search results, and refiners that you can build. You can build out. You can use the search schema within the SharePoint Admin Center, and it just means that again you can bring that additional rich depth to what you can achieve with your SharePoint intranet. Not only for your content, but you can also target your people. So your targets could be, I want an organizational or a staff directory. The staff directory works quite well with Delve. It's not as polished as what I would like. So I'll create my own where I can then index the attributes that are in Delve, like my department, my office location, telephone numbers, and so on. And then I can make that searchable, refinable, and nice to look at using the PnP web parts. Again, if I want more than that, then there are plenty of third-party products that will sit on top of SharePoint, whether that's actually embedded directly into them as additional web parts, which bring additional functionality and additional look and feel, and also those that sit outside and call in. So you do have options to put that additional layer of shine on top of what is already a very, very solid and very nice looking product. Wow, so I've covered quite a lot during that session. I hope that everybody's followed that. But what we've really gone through really is a quick look at the evolution of where SharePoint, of how SharePoint has got to where it is now, and how the whole audiencing aspect has really shifted from being a SharePoint expert, a developer-focused product, to being a very end-user driven product instead. So making it as easy as possible for anybody with no necessarily programming experience or no content authoring experience to create content that's rich, it's nice, and it will get put into SharePoint and everybody can then take advantage of it. We looked at the capabilities of the communication sites about how we can use that to leverage our communications, but how we can also start to leverage some of the personalization into that from both a web part point of view, using some of the Graph API, Graph web parts to actually bring what is relevant to me through news, documents, and sites, but also how we can then implement some of the newer functionalities, such as audiencing, to be able to, again, target parts of content or navigation to specific groups of users. We spoke very briefly about the hub sites, about how they work, about how I started to use them within my SharePoint intranets. And I'm definitely going to get the invite for when Susan Hanley talks about this in a couple of months' time to really get see her take on this as well, because I'm really interested in how hub sites are, for me, the future of a SharePoint intranet. But we also spoke about the home site and the capability to promote one site above all the others. So that when you load up the mobile app, you can press the home button and you're going to get to your SharePoint homepage. How you can leverage content from all of your other sites and roll it up to your home site so that you can then really take advantage of it. And then we've looked at some of the accessibility features, and we've spoken about the accessibility aspects of the immersive reader, of the AI putting alt text on, because I always forget to do that, but also the language abilities that we've got now in terms of translations, and also those new features that are rolling through with regards to how we can make our pages as graphically rich as possible using good quality photos from either stock images or from our organizational assets. Whew. And that's me done. Have we got any questions?
Yeah, we had one question about, I believe this is about the translations or the different languages. How does the system know which version to present to a user?
So it does pick up on the browser settings. So whatever your native language is in your browser will then feed through into SharePoint as well. So, for example, I know that I've got some people that I work with in France. They will see the French version as opposed to the English version. So it is aware of the capabilities or the language setting within the browser.
And that is all the questions. Anybody else have questions? Just wait a little bit, but I think it's done. I'm gonna share just a slide here. And so let's see here. Okay, well, that's it for today's meeting. Matt, I want to thank you for presenting today, and also for our Office 365 conference. And I really appreciate it. And this, hopefully, if everything worked out right, this session was recorded, and I'll be able to send out links to the recording or post it to our website so that you'll be able to go back and view it again or share it. Remember, next month, our user group meeting is on September 2nd. There is a link right there for the live event. There's no registration required. I'll be sending out notices via our email list. But anyway, I thank you again, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right, bye.